This is the Buwwy Breakdown, recorded Tuesday, June 14th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the future of E3 and what what we're going to see after the aftermath of this Summer Games Fest. Okay, so hello. Good happy Tuesday. Hope you got your week started off well yesterday. E3 is kind of, so I'm opening my blinds here so there's light, not that you can see me. E3 is one of those things that in gaming has always been sacred to me, and people seem to are able emotionally or somehow to just kind of throw it in the trash and say, well, E3's dead. It's this new age of digital media, digital presentations. There's no need for an E3 anymore. There's no need to bring everyone out to LA and then do all this stuff for all these, retailers and press and whatnot, because, digital just allows that information to come faster and it gets seen by more people. So it's kind of interesting how we're kind of breaking out of E3. And in this episode, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit and have kind of a therapy session about E3 being dead, because I think after this Summer Games Fest, I think that's proven that E3 is dead. Now, E3 said they're doing something next year. They haven't given dates. And Jeff Keighley, who runs Summer Games Fest, I was watching him do a Q&A, and he said that they'll be doing it again next year, but who knows when, and specifically, so they don't know if the dates will collide or not, and how the platforms will, like the Xbox showcases and the Sony and Capcom and Square and all these, Nintendo, all these things, how they would fare. Interestingly, I think there's a few things that shows that this is dead, that E3 is dead. And Summer Games Fest is kind of a perfect encapsulation of why E3 is dead to me. Now, for those who don't remember, and I was actually watching clips of old E3, I just kind of wanted to get in nostalgia, so, I would watch the old Jack Tretton interviews with Jeff Keighley, right, like E3 2013, with the PS4 right before it came out, and there was all this, if you don't remember, the big issue was DRM, right? Xbox would only allow you to use share used games on a family plan with 10 other people, whereas PS4, and it confused everyone. They didn't know how it was going to work, and it's like, well, screw you, Xbox, just let me do my used games. GameStop everyone hated it, and Xbox eventually turned their course literally the week after. But Sony at their legendary press conference not only announced that they weren't going to do any of that shit with used games. In fact, their price point for the console was going to be $100 less than the Xbox One, which was impressive in its own right, and was probably one of the biggest reasons that Sony ended up winning the console generation. So something we're going to miss from that is that that sense of competition right away. We're gonna miss that. Usually game consoles come out in the same time frame. That's not always true. The Xbox 360 came out, I believe, a year before the PS3, and so that's not necessarily the case. Actually, it's probably weird that they come out around the same time now, but that's been the trend for the past two generations. But it's kind of sad we're going to miss all those moments of competition. I think that's something that a lot of people in the games industry are missing now is make love not console wars, which is fine, I get it. But, console wars have been a big reason why the games we play are the way they are that good. That's why Sony games are Sony games, because they have to be that way, so they're exclusive. So you play their games. Sure, they're laying them on PC, but in embracing the thing that'll probably make them more money in the long run, which is just putting their games on PC, because fucking PC players are a lot of them, and they're not gonna buy a PlayStation just to play Spider-Man. So fuck, you'll just sell a lot, just put it on Steam. But you know, back in the day, that's how it used to be, right? It was just crazy. Anyway, sorry, I'm kind of going on a big tangent. I kind of wanted to make this. I'm going all over the place. I kind of want to make this a E3 discussion. So let's just talk about this Summer Games Fest. So Summer Games Fest kind of proves that we don't have E3 simply because E3 used to be what the point I was making with that that I'm making now that I didn't make with that, but I'm retroactively putting a pin on that, is that all of this news used to always happen within that week. E3 used to be like a few days of press conferences and then a few days of like press just demonstrations or demos, right? Where the press, and then eventually once they let the general public in like 2016, I think, I don't remember. Once they let the general public come and do E3, which was itself a disaster, you know, they got to do demos too. And that's where E3 kind of turned from a trade show to a consumer kind of fan event. It seemed more of, it was always a trade show at heart, but you could see in the press conferences that we had. But you know, Jeff Keighley kind of got pissed about it for losing its identity, and I kind of I do agree with that. E3 by the end did kind of become this big consumer kind of mess. But you know, I think there's value to all those games being announced in a week. Now there's pros and cons to having your games all announced at this E3 event, and most people would say there's more cons, which I'd probably agree with. Right, so let's say it depends on who you are, right? If you're the big three, if you're Sony, PlayStation, or Microsoft, there are pros and cons to having an E3. The pros are, hey, you know, you're if you have a good showcase, you are in direct competition with Xbox and Nintendo. You know, now they can, you know, you'll be compared to them, and your superior lineup will be shown for what it is, right? And people will see that it's easy to compare and contrast like that. Of course, if you do have a weak showing, it's not necessarily a good thing. And, you know, there's generally, as another con, you know, when you, especially as a big publisher, have that much sway, have that much power, have that many people who want to watch your conferences, they don't want to dilute the audience when in the news when everything else is going on, right? Xbox is announcing a thing tomorrow, you know, Xbox goes tomorrow. Everything from the PlayStation conference is kind of swept to the side for a little bit. Similarly with Nintendo, although Nintendo usually went last, so their kind of announcements kind of stuck a little more. And we kind of got that this year as well. We kind of saw that, right, with the Xbox and PlayStation went a week before. So the PlayStation news got a little bit of news of room to breathe. I mean, however, it wasn't really a place. I wouldn't consider the state of play we got a press conference in the slightest. It was just Sony showing some games that we would want to see, and big games, like giant games, like Final Fantasy 16, Resident Evil 4 remake, Street Fighter 6. You know, they showed a lot of games that are massive, and that was an if I were to give a name to that would be an E3 caliber state of play, right? Not necessarily a state of play that is like normal, because normal state of plays usually just have smaller announcements. Maybe, I don't know what the biggest announcement from a state of play was. I think The Last of Us 2 release date was given on a state of play. I want to say that was the case, but I don't remember. I think that's literally the biggest news that has come out of a state of play. So this state of play would be the biggest with that for sure. We got to see so many games that people are really interested in that are coming mostly exclusive for Sony. Certainly, if not plain exclusive, at least have exclusive content. Like Resident Evil 4 with the VR, and then Xbox when they did their thing. You know, I think E3 is it's difficult to say. And then Nintendo's going this later, in apparently June 29th, which I wouldn't even consider part of Summer Games Fest, right? Nintendo wasn't even a part of that, and I think that's Nintendo's signal that, hey, we don't we're not doing E3. We don't care. We're good. We can do our own thing. And I think that's what a lot of platforms are discovering with this, is that they can do their own thing whenever they want. And it's great because when E3 came around, it was always usually you either had a lot coming out or you didn't have anything coming out, because that's how, especially near the end there, game cycles worked, right? Games are taking longer and longer to develop. They're taking more and more resources, more and more time, more and more effort to really impress people. And it's come to the point where you can't just go to an E3 show and expect them to show a lot every single year. Sometimes they will show, like, for example, this isn't necessarily E3 related, but I just want to give an example of what happens when you blow your load. Xbox, in their June 2020 event, this was not related to E3, right? Xbox just had their own little event that they wanted to show all their games and get people excited. Well, at this event, they announced five giant, huge games, just massive games. And I talked a bit about this on the show on the episode a couple days ago, but they announced. I'm trying to look it up just so I can get it perfectly. Okay, they announced State of Decay 3. I'm gonna count Everwild, even though that was announced in 2019. I just want to count it just to make, for the sake of this argument, because we haven't seen it yet. So that's why I'm bringing it up. Avowed, Hellblade 2, and Fable. So these are 5 games that, for the most part, we saw Hellblade at the Game Awards, but for the most part, have been now officially reaching the 2-year mark, where we haven't seen them since then, barely. We certainly haven't gotten any solid release dates, and they certainly haven't been shipped, so the developer's not working on anything new necessarily. So Xbox has struggled the last couple of showcases, especially the last two. I mean, they bought Bethesda, so they've kind of been helped there, but they're not able to show these games that they announced. They're not because they announced them too early. They're not able to show Fable. Like, it's been 2 years since that was announced, and we haven't seen anything, which is wild, right? I mean, unless a game is in development hell, that usually never happens. It's usually we will see something at least 2 or 3. It used to be back, it's like a decade ago. I get game development has changed and stuff, but it used to be you could expect a game to be released like 3 years after it was announced. At most 4, but it would usually be targeting about 3 if it was an initial announcement. Clearly, and this happened with the Outer Worlds 2, I believe, last year, right? They announced the Outer Worlds 2, and the whole joke was they were showing these cool slow motion things, and the narrator was like, "You've been waiting for this game, and we don't even have a title yet. We don't have gameplay. We don't have graphic. We don't have concept art. We don't have anything. All we have is the title." And then they show Outer Worlds 2. It's like, then just don't announce it. Don't announce it. Now I'm going to be expecting it literally every time you have a showcase. And that's what happens with like Everwild, right? Everwild they showed long trailer, and it looked like it was semi-in-engine. So it was kind of weird not to see it the last 2 years. Similar with Avowed. It's just these games are taking longer and longer to come out, to the point where yearly conferences aren't able to get enough new announcements to garner interest. That was my whole point in going with that. You can't do yearly events anymore. And I think a lot of people are understanding that. Square didn't do anything for this conference. Square did absolutely nothing for this Summer Games Fest. But they did something last year. And they didn't have anything to show last year. Remember? They had so many games. Final Fantasy 16, Forspoken, Final Fantasy 7 Remake Part 2, if you want to count that. It doesn't matter. But there were, among others, there were plenty of games that that were in development that we knew about that we didn't see. But they still had an event at E3. They still had an E3 event that they kind of hyped up, and all they showed was like Guardians of the Galaxy. That was the biggest thing of the show, and then they showed a lot of other small announcements, as well as ending with Stranger of Paradise, which at that time wasn't even announced. But the point in bringing all of this up is they honestly probably had just as much content they could have showed at the Summer Games Fest if they wanted to have their own developer showcase, publisher showcase. Square could have shown some Forspoken shit. Square could have shown more Final Fantasy 16 shit. I mean, look at Capcom. They did a showcase yesterday, and they showed like 2 seconds of Resident Evil 4 gameplay, and that was it. That's all they showed that wasn't already showed in the PlayStation conference. Square could have done something similar to that. I mean, so that's kind of saying it, but instead they decided to go to the PlayStation thing. So it's kind of saying to me a few things. Number one is I think developers and publishers are starting to learn that, it's stupid. All our game development takes crazy long. Any big game that people want to see is going to take years to come out. That's most likely going to get delayed. Every game gets delayed nowadays. And second, and then that all relates to, we just don't have enough in a showcase. We can show some indie games, we can show some other stuff, but we just can't. There's no way we can possibly show this game, blah, 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 X game that people want to see. And then secondly, people don't want the news dominated by all the other announcements, especially if you're a smaller publisher. The thing where E3 makes the least sense, kind of, is if you're a Square Enix type, is if you're a Capcom type, and you have your own stuff. Because usually people just watch the big three announcements, and I think people are understand that, and I think we're gonna get to a day eventually, whether it's because all these companies are bought out by the big three, or whether it's just because people don't care enough about Square Enix Presents or Capcom Showcase. You're just gonna get a big State of Play, a big Xbox Showcase, and a big Microsoft or a big Nintendo Showcase. And everything Square and Capcom games will be in the PlayStation. Microsoft will have all their exclusive, of course, Nintendo with Nintendo. And these will take place every so often, because I think they realize that, if you band together with your publishers, I mean, Xbox has enough studios they own to where they have the potential to make several games a year in which they can do at least a couple of showcases. Same with Sony. They have so many publishing partners that are really close with them, like Square and Capcom, that they have plenty of games that they could show that are coming out exclusively for PlayStation. Similar with Nintendo. So I think all these companies will kind of band together and do their own events whenever they want to. That's sad. But people, at E3 expect you to do your own thing, expect you to show as a third-party publisher. Sega counts too. All of the Ubisoft, they expect you to do that kind of thing, and sometimes you just don't have the resources to put on a big show, and you're just kind of swept under the rug. The only thing that E3 is really positive towards is indie games, and that is something that is interesting. So, like, for example, at the Xbox Bethesda Games Showcase the other day, I wouldn't have known about this Lightyear Frontier game, but yet Lightyear Frontier has become my most favorite game in recent memory. I absolutely love that game, and it's what I think everything gaming should be. The game has colors. The game uses lighting to invoke an atmosphere that is just absolutely beautiful. And it just looks like a game that is pleasant to play. It looks like a game that has not a statement to make, but just it just looks like an enjoyable time. It's my kind of game. I like when games use actual colors and actual and vibrancy to envelop their game world in a sense of wonder and excitement. I remember that's kind of what Minecraft did years ago. And I think this Lightyear Frontier is similar. I'm very excited to check it out, but that game probably wouldn't have gotten the amount of attention it has, and I'm worried that if game companies do have enough, like if game companies did band together and did these big conferences with announcement after big announcement after big announcement, because they're just doing this one thing and they're getting everybody to do it, so they have something to show. I'm worried that we're going to be losing a lot of those indie games. That's what I love about the Xbox showcases. They always showcase indie games that are coming to, even though they're coming to Game Pass. I know they have a point to showing them, but they're still indie games, and they're still games that, should be shown and should have a chance. I think everyone would agree with that. So I don't know how E3 is going to affect that or not, but I think in terms of, that's just me kind of speaking, but in terms of actual predictions of what's going to happen with E3, I don't know. I think E3 they say they're doing a physical event in LA like usual, and I'm sure companies will come. I'm sure Xbox will do something for E3. I feel like that they will. They usually try to. They do something every summer, and they have enough studios to where they can bring at least a good showcase a year. I think they have enough studios, honestly, to where they have that much material, as long as they don't blow it all at one conference like they did in 2020. But game developers tend to do that. If they're 2020 was a prickly spot for them, right? 2020 was, hey, we got to win people on the Series X. We got to show them that games are coming. Let's just kind of blow our load and show them, hey, look at the games we got. We got so many good games. I don't think Sony did a better job. I think they did a similar thing in their event that they did. I think it was also summer 2020. I don't exactly remember what they announced in that. I'd have to go back, but they had a similar event, but they just haven't been as bad with it because they've actually been releasing the games they said they would. They've been releasing Ratchet and Clank. They've been releasing Miles Morales. They released other game that's not coming to my brain. They're gonna Horizon Forbidden West. They released they're going to release God of War hopefully this year. There's plenty of games that Sony's released that said Xbox just hasn't done that yet. Not as much, I feel. I guess Halo, but Forza. They just announced too much, is what I'm saying. But I wonder how many things. I wonder, the thing that Summer Games Fest had, and I think Summer Game Fest is kind of a stupid thing. I think a lot of these things, I don't know how to say it. So Summer Games Fest, the actual Jeff Keighley show was really bad this year. And I know Jeff would disagree and say, well, these games need to be shown. Listen, I agree with you. I totally agree, but you paced this show really bad. I mean, there were like five space, no joke, at least like 6 space survival horror games. And there were no big games. I mean, you do need big games in a show. I'm sorry. You need big games. And the only big giant games they had was Last of Us Part 1, which was lame. And maybe Callisto Protocol, that's kind of grown into a big game in and of itself. They just didn't have anything at the actual showcase that was that interesting. The reason Xbox showcases work is because these indie games, that it's an Xbox showcase, so there's something big coming. At the end of this showcase that you're going to see Starfield. So you have that, okay, well, as this sucks, at least I'm going to see Starfield in 20 minutes. So whatever. You have that mindset. These Summer Games Fest, you don't necessarily anymore, because Jeff showed, hey, we the publishers and would rather just do their own showcases. And I think that's what's gonna happen. Naturally, June and July is usually a low. Specifically, June is such a low time for game releases that it's. I mean, it's always been the time where you announce games because nothing's really coming out, and that's when it's the best time to release things. Just that's the cycle of the way things are. So it's not like the summer events aren't gonna stop. It's just gonna be, it just won't take place at E3. But I'm sure for the next couple of years, it's going to be interesting to watch E3 and Summer Games Fest try to compete in a sense. I think Summer Game Fest will win out as a catch-all term for I don't know, as a brand, if it will be like I think E3 will be dead. I think E3 will eventually say, listen, the industry's outgrown us. I'm sorry, we just there's no purpose for us. And then Summer Games Fest is just going to be this catch-all term for anything that takes place within that June month. And most things will take place. I think there is a benefit to everybody if everything took place within a month and you got to see all these games being announced, whether it be indie or some big games. And Sony will have an event at the beginning of the month, and Xbox will have one at the middle of the month, and Nintendo will have one at the end of the month. I mean, there you go. Basically what happened this year, but just different. And they'll all be under the Summer Games Fest banner. Maybe not if they don't want to, but I mean, in spirit, that's what they will be. Summer Games Fest, I don't think is necessary. I don't think Jeff can build this thing into a brand. I think he's trying to do that, like the Game Awards, but Summer Games Fest it's just not a brand. And I think, the idea of all these games being announced this summer is the brand, right? It's just everything will be in that month. It will be just spread out so that everybody can get their time in the sun. And will that mean that every now and then we'll get a Capcom showcase if they think they have enough to show on their own, or a Square Enix showcase if they think that? Sure. I'm sure we will, and I'm sure they will do that. And Ubisoft and EA, I mean, if they think they have enough to show in their own little direct style thing, yeah. E3 died when Nintendo did directs. That's when E3 died. That's the minute in the history books. That'll be the second when Nintendo said, "Hey, we're just gonna do a digital event for E3." That's when E3, at least as a press show where people did press conferences, died. Because then Nintendo said, well, hey, we can do these directs year round and give people more intimate updates on our developers and games and what we're working on. And that was genius. And now we see how that's evolved after over 10 years of doing them. So we'll see, man. We'll see, but it's a fascinating thing to do. And I think I think there is room for having big events, but I think there will only be for console launches, right? I think when the PS6 comes around, Sony will have a physical event, so like a PlayStation Experience type event. Xbox will have a physical event to show it off and people presenting it. Nintendo had one for the Switch as well. I think those things won't die out. I think we'll get those obviously once every 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or however long these console cycles are. But yeah, I guess historically, I've actually, through this discussion, I've kind of become more comfortable with E3 dying. I just missed E3. I think E3 is just something that I was always excited about. I always remember fondly watching Jeff Keighley on the YouTube at the YouTube Live at E3 thing, where he'd have developers come in and show their games, and after a press conference, for example, after the Microsoft press conference, he'd have Todd Howard come in a while later and talk about Fallout 76 or something. And it was fascinating. It was fun to watch. And you just got excited. You'd wake up and you'd see, ooh, who's today? Okay, Sony and Ubisoft. Ooh, okay, that's interesting. Oh, Sony. And then you'd hear rumors throughout the day, and it's like, oh, Sony's gonna showcase 4 games today. Okay, Ghost of Tsushima. Spider-Man, Last of Us Part 2, and another one I forgot. I know they showcased for it. But I mean, remember, and then they had The Last of Us 2 in the little hut, and everyone thought that was so stupid. You know, and the hype moment of, you know, there's just so many fun things that come out of E3 historically that I'm gonna miss. I'm just gonna miss them. Mr. Coffee, giant enemy crab, the announcement of the PS3 price, that entire Microsoft conference when they announced the Xbox One and shit, at least the games for it, and the DRM stuff, and you know, all of these memories. I kick ass, and we're about taking names, we're about making games or whatever. I don't remember what Reggie exactly said. And my body's ready. When Miyamoto couldn't get the Wii to work in Skyward Sword, the fucking Wii music, that bitch playing Wii Sport. I mean, there's nothing better than some of these moments at these conferences. $2.99 or whatever from the, I think that was the PlayStation one way back. That was in the 90s. But, you know, there's just all these conferences that we're gonna... Miyamoto coming out with the sword and the shield after announcing Twilight Princess. Sorry, Keanu Reeves. Going through all of these. But there's just so many fun moments that happen at E3 that will always live in the memory of E3. And it's sad. And I remember a lot of those trailers so vividly. I remember the Resident Evil 2 announcement, how cool that was. Now that kind of came out of nowhere. I just and watching that trailer every once in a while after and going like, oh, who won? What's the best trailer? I remember the Fallout 76 trailer. I was so excited for that game. It looked so amazing. And then Todd describing it was fascinating. It was just, you know, I don't know. E3, you know, it's gonna be something we have to mourn, but hopefully mourn in a way that is proactive, because I don't think that all of that is dying, but I think it's E3 is certainly dead, which sucks, which is again a statement that really sucks. It was a staple for like 25 years, you know. It was around for a long time, and not anymore. I guess you could also say when Sony left was the time E3 died as well, because Sony left in 2019 because they didn't, you know, their press conference in 2018, despite I enjoyed it, I think because in their 2018 press conference, I kind of went through this, but they didn't really announce too much, but they were just going to showcase like 4 games specifically. Death Stranding was the other one. So they start out with The Last of Us Part 2 in a tent, and they showed an extended gameplay demo. And then everyone moved from the tent. It was really interesting because the actual press were physically moving from the tent into the actual venue that they were going to show the rest of the show in. And for the people at home, they just had this really weird, like, people at this desk that were talking about, like, really minor shit, like, oh, PlayStation will have this Call of Duty DLC day 1 and exclusive map and shit and whatever. But it's really weird. And then they went back to the conference and they showed Death Stranding, Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man. Of course, as I said, Resident Evil 2 was announced there, so there was some big announcements in between those, but they showed, what I loved about it is they showed extended gameplay demos of those. But anyways, people thought the pacing was pretty bad, and it was not that great. But after that, Sony was like, you know what, we don't need E3, we'll just skip. And they did. And you know, E3, first of all, wasn't the same after that, but also just Sony still had success. Sony realized, hey, we don't need E3. People know us. People know it's PlayStation. Screw them, dude. They know what's coming out. We don't have anything coming out, but we don't care, dude. And then they haven't done anything since. They like to do their own thing. So does Nintendo. So does everyone just likes to do their own thing. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. If companies want to do their own shit, whatever. Just do it. Who cares, man? Just do it in June so we can all have that time to kind of look forward to. Because I always looked forward to E3 every year, and now it's kind of... I don't really have that to look forward to in June. June is like Christmas for video game players. I mean, it really was an exciting time. But yeah. Anyway, sorry for the long rant therapy session kind of thing. I was like 30 minutes, but I just kind of wanted to get my unresearched, kind of organized thoughts on the whole situation about E3, and because again, Summer Games Fest got me thinking, hey, what is E3 anymore? You know, this is clearly just a shell of E3. But is this the future? I mean, is there something to say about Summer Games Fest that it is not E3 and that's why it is the future? Who knows? I think Summer Games Fest is more an idea. It's more... excuse me. It's more an, a concept for... for this time. It's more just a name for this time period. Anyways, that's all I have to say about E3. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next video, hopefully talking about something a little more light, a little more interesting than the death of E3. But I can't be sure. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time for the next Buwwy breakdown. Voice crack. Hope you guys enjoyed, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Check out the main channel. I'm working on 2 videos simultaneously. Those are coming along pretty decently, so look forward to that, and I'll see you guys for the next one. Goodbye.